Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial bite for Oxygen Not Included, which is all about Radbolts. These are only found in the Spaced Out DLC, not in the base game, and have important mid and late game uses. Specifically there are 4, these being Materials Research, Radbolt Engines, Diamond Presses, and Interplanetary Launchers. I'll explain how to generate and manage Radbolts, as well as covering these buildings. So to start, there are 2 methods of generating Radbolts, and these are unsurprisingly the Radbolt Generator and manual Radbolt Generator. Naturally, the manual Radbolt Generator is the simplest method and only requires dupe labour and either uranium ore or enriched uranium. When a dupe completes the task, a Radbolt shot is fired from the eye of the machine and you can choose its direction. These travel in a straight line and can injure dupes or critters if contacted. Each shot is made from multiple Radbolts, and how many depends on the generator. As they travel, they also lose 0.2 Radbolts per tile, so it's advisable to locate your Radbolt generators and consumers near each other. The manual Radbolt generator will make shots of 5 Radbolts if using uranium ore, or 25 if using refined uranium. I will cover uranium refining in the tutorial bite for nuclear reactors, but for manual Radbolt generation, it isn't worth refining uranium ore in the centrifuge building, but using beaters will increase efficiency. Radbolt generators consume 480 watts of power and produce Radbolts at a rate which is 1/10 of the radiation level on the green hexagon covered tile. They do generate a notable amount of heat, but do not overheat and will simply melt if too hot. To check the radiation level, use the radiation overlay, which is in the top right or on the hotkey Shift and F4. So in order to get the most efficiency out of the generators, we need to make high levels of radiation. This makes Radbolts more quickly, and because the power draw is always the same, the more quickly you can generate Radbolts, the less power is consumed per Radbolt. The Radbolt generator also has a setting which determines the number of Radbolts collected before they fire a shot. Beware also that Radbolt generators will rapidly lose Radbolts if left unpowered, so ensure you have a stable power supply before running these. I'll now cover the key sources of radiation, but beware that dupe exposure to radiation is dangerous, and if you want more information on the effects, check out my tutorial bite on germs and diseases. When working in areas of high radiation, you may also wish to use lead suits, which I covered in the tutorial bite for exosuits, which is also linked in the card. The first source of radiation is from space, and the levels vary depending on the planetoid. Although these levels can make dupes sick, it's not really enough by itself to efficiently charge a Radbolt generator. So earlier on, there are 2 reliable sources, these being radiation lamps and Wheezeworts. Radiation lamps require 60 watts of power, 10 kilograms per cycle of uranium ore, and must be placed on walls. Using uranium ore in this way is about 45% more efficient than using the manual Radbolt generator, but you can use 2 or more, but with the extra energy cost. There are many ways to set this up, and I'm showing an example here with the maximum radiation on the key tile. Remember, the lamps need to be accessible to be resupplied, and I would recommend keeping this away from your research station to minimise dupe exposure. You may also wish to use extra tiles which block radiation. I'll also discuss Radbolt pathing shortly. The other alternative is Wheezeworts, and I would recommend this solution if you have access to these plants as they're simpler to manage. These only require phosphorite, which can be easily mined, and is also produced by Drecos as waste. For good levels of radioactivity, I'm using 5 in this pattern as shown. You could also use more if you have some, but if you have fewer, then simply use as many as you have, possibly in addition to radiation lamps. Later on, the only major source of radiation is nuclear reactors. These create large amounts of radiation, and it's possible to place Radbolt generators inside or outside the reactor chamber. If placed inside the chamber, then liquid locks will be required to get them out to the machines, which can be somewhat complicated to build. As I mentioned earlier, I will cover nuclear reactors in detail in their own tutorial bite. But to get extremely high levels of radiation, that is well over the 8,000 rads per tile of even a nuclear reactor, nuclear waste compression must be used. This uses infinite liquid storage with a different liquid, as I explained in the tutorial bite for infinite storage. Here we have a tile of petroleum which prevents the liquid vent from overpressuring, and a tile of large amounts of nuclear waste. At around 25 tons here, there's around 2,200 rads per tile, and there's no limit to how high this can go. The radioactivity is slightly less than 1 rad per 10 kilograms of waste, so a lot will be needed. To generate this, you can use nuclear reactors, or alternatively a rocket tunnel with a Radbolt engine where the rocket exhaust is condensed. I will also have a dedicated tutorial bite on rocket tunnels. With the Radbolt generators, the next step is to get the Radbolt shots from them into the machines, and of course the simplest way to do this would be to simply shoot in a straight line. However, this risks hitting dupes, so there are buildings to help with this, namely the Radbolt Reflectors. These take in Radbolt shots on their large circular tile and then re-emit them from the eye in the direction you choose. The Radbolt shots need to make their way to the input tiles on the machines, which is on the crosses as shown here. A much safer way to do this is to send the Radbolt shots over the machines and then down into the receivers. For chaining multiple receiving buildings in this way, you can use multiple Radbolt reflectors controlled with automation. It's important to remember that the automation output from the machines is green if full, so you'll need to use a NOT gate to activate the reflector when Radbolts are needed. At this point I should also mention the Radbolt Chamber building, which can store 100 Radbolts and re-emit them later. Personally I don't use this, as I think it's easier to simply turn the generators off when not needed, and each of the receiving buildings has some Radbolt storage built in. So as the final topic, I'm going to summarise the 4 buildings that use Radbolts, and I'll start with the Materials Study Terminal. I'll cover this in a separate tutorial bite on research, but in brief this generates applied science research, and is the yellow bar required for the latter half of the research tree in the spaced out DLC, and so it's very important. It has a storage capacity of 100 Radbolts, which will produce 10 units of material research. Radbolt generators can be controlled with automation, and I'm showing a typical example here where the research terminal controls the generator. As I explained with the reflectors, the NOT gate is needed as the terminal outputs green when full. The next building is the Radbolt engine, which is a top tier rocket engine. This consumes 200 Radbolts per hex and can store 4000 Radbolts for a 20 tile range. It emits nuclear fallout gas when launching and landing, which is the gas form of nuclear waste. I will cover rocketry in its own tutorial bite. Diamond presses straightforwardly turn refined carbon, made from coal in the kiln, into diamond, which is particularly useful for mining space points of interest. Diamond window tiles are also excellent for decor or heat transfer and are therefore commonly found in advanced builds. This machine takes 1000 Radbolts and 100 kg of refined carbon per 100 kg of diamond, so needs large amounts of radiation. I should also note that this can be considered a sustainable use, as coal and refined carbon can be mined in large quantities from space points of interest, thus making even more diamond. Finally, the last use is for interplanetary launchers, which fire material packets to other planetoids. The amount required depends on the mass fired, and the maximum 200 kg packets will require 10 Radbolts per hex of distance. This machine can store 200 Radbolts as a maximum, and has inputs for liquid pipes, gas pipes, and conveyor rails. Clicking on the launcher allows you to choose the planetoid, and these packets then appear in the star map and move very quickly. Packets then land randomly on the surface unless a targeting beacon is present, which will guide the packets to within 3 tiles of the left or 2 to the right. Once landed, they can be manually opened by dupes by clicking on the empty storage button, or automatically opened with the Payload opener building. The Payload opener building then has output ports to move the material on. So that's all for this tutorial bite about Radbolts and oxygen not included. I hope this helps you handle them safely with confidence, and thanks for watching.